Namaste, everybody. We have been talking for the last 4 weeks on Gita chapter 15. So, this chapter 15 will hopefully be completed today in the next few minutes, and then we will recap everything. I will take questions on that, and then we will see what we have learned from the Gita so far. So, I'll share my screen now here in the next 5 seconds. So, hopefully, you should see the screen now. All right, so I was looking at this earlier. So we are on 16th verse, and I had a volunteer who was going to do the chanting. And let me see if Prasad is online. Prasad, are you online? Is your son ready to recite?
I'm ready.
Completely awesome. So why don't you get started with verse 16? It's on my screen as well as you should have it in front of you also. Dvavimau purusho loke. Can you do that?
द्वाविमौ पुरुषौ लोके क्षरश्चाक्षर एव च क्षरः सर्वाणि भूतानि कूटस्थोऽक्षर उच्यते.
Next one. Keep going.
उत्तमः पुरुषस्त्वन्यः परमात्मेत्युदाहृतः यो लोकत्रयमाविश्य बिभर्त्यव्यय ईश्वरः यस्मात् क्षरमतीतोऽहम् अक्षरादपि चोत्तमः अतोऽस्मि लोके च प्रथितः पुरुषोत्तमः यो मामेवमसम्मूढः जानाति पुरुषोत्तमं स सर्वविद् भजति मां सर्वभावेन भारत इति गुह्यतमं शास्त्रम् इदमुक्तं मया नघ एतद् बुद्ध्वा बुद्धिमान् स्यात् कृतकृत्यश्च भारत.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This was awesome. Completely awesome. So, Pranav Haure, my friend Prasad's son, was the one who was singing this, and such a beautiful rendition. Delighted to hear this. So, we will now try to understand the meaning of all these verses. The Lord says, Dvavimau purusho loke ksharashchakshara evacha. Sharas sarvani bhutani kutastho kshara uchyate. Right? So until now, the Lord has told us about the world, then he told us about the Jiva, then he told us about the Ishvara, and ultimately he said, Sarvasya chaham Rudhi sannivishto matta smriti jnanam apohanam cha vedaischa sarvair aham eva vedyo vedantakrut veda videva chaham. So he said, I am the maker of the Vedas, I am the maker of the Vedanta, I am the one to be known, I am the author of the Vedas, I am the knower of the Vedas. So it's all our own description. All right. Now he starts telling the nature of who I am. Okay. So earlier in one of the webinars, I had said we have to internalize all of this as our own story. So when we understand all of this as our own story, that's when we truly understand the meaning of the Gita. So until now, the Lord has told us about the Jagat or the world. Can you please all mute you, all of you? I think some people are not muted yet. So maybe I should try to go and see if I can mute everybody. Let me see. Or if you can just do that on your own, that will be great, because I don't know how to do that while I'm making this presentation and I'm also the host. So please make sure you are the, just 1 second. I think I can do that because somebody's, okay. Wonderful. Let me now concentrate on the talk here. Somebody is unmuted. Can you please mute yourself? I would really appreciate that. Because I can hear the traffic behind your screen because you are not talking. A lot of background noise is heard, which is heard by all of us. So if you can please help me, that will be great. So where are we? We are again on verse 16. So dvavimau purusho loke ksharashchakshara evaja ksharas sarvani bhutani kutastho kshara uchyate. Right? So the meaning is there are two purushas in this world, the perishable and the imperishable. All beings are the perishable and the kutastha is called the imperishable. So this is the literal meaning of this verse. But I'll tell you the way I understand this. You see, the same divine principle appears in two forms. It appears as the perishable and it also appears as the imperishable. So look at our own selves, right? We have an understanding of who we are as, say, I will say I'm Vikram. I have been the same Vikram when I was in elementary school or primary school, then high school, then college, then got a PhD. Now I have a family. I'm a father of 2 kids, right? But I'm Vikram. This thing has not changed. All right, what has changed? I had a child body in the beginning, then I had a teenager body thereafter, then I had an adult body thereafter, and now I have an middle-aged body. I have a middle-aged body, right? So this has changed. So this is the Kshara Purush. Okay. And my understanding of who I am, I'm Vikram, that is the Akshara Purush, that is the continuity, right? So in a way, if you look at myself, or if I look at myself, then if I consider myself the Jiva or the life within me, or me as Vikram, then that is the Akshara and the body as the Kshara. Okay. So that is how I can see Kshara and Akshara. But both of these have been created from the same entity, isn't it? The same divine entity became both Vikram and his body. Is that not true? So that's how, I'll give you another example that will make it even clearer. See, the way we look at each other or the way we interact with each other, the way we look at everything in the world is the way the waves on the ocean will look at other waves. So if I'm a wave, then I will look at all the other waves as apart from me, other than me, right? But all of these waves have come from the same ocean, is it not? So to understand that, what do I need to do? I need to only dive maybe 6 inches deeper in the ocean, and then I realize that there are no waves. It's only the ocean. But look at this whole thing from the point of view of water. So if you ask water, what is the ocean? Water will say, what is the ocean? It's just me. What are the waves? Water will say, no, what are the waves? It's just me. So water itself has become the ocean and water itself has become the waves, right? So the same divine principle has become the Ishvara and also become the Jiva. It has become the Prakriti, it has become the Purush. Okay. So the imperishable principle and the perishable principle, both of them have come from the same divine eternal principle. So the imperishable is referred to here as Kutastha. Kutastha meaning the anvil. Okay, Kutastha is the anvil on which we put any piece of metal or iron and then we beat it so that we can change the shape. So the iron, its shape can be changed. So that is perishable. That's how the world is. That's how our body is. Okay? But the Kutastha, it is steady. See, we can only experience change if there is an unchanging or unmoving principle watching it, is it not? So for example, we are in a train on the station, right? If the train next to us starts moving, then we feel like we are moving, right? And then if we look at the platform on the other side, then we realize, no, we are steady, but that train is moving, right? Now, if both trains are moving at the same speed, or if two cars are moving at the same speed on a highway in two lanes, it will seem like everything else is moving, but the cars are steady, because relative to each other, they are moving at the same pace. In the same manner, see, all of us are presently moving at, depending upon where you are in the world, anywhere between 600 and 1000 kilometers per hour, because the earth is moving at that speed around itself, right? But we don't experience that movement at all, because we are moving at the same speed as the earth. That's why there is no movement experienced, although there is movement. So in the same manner, depending upon where we are in terms of our own consciousness, we will either experience movement or we will experience no movement. Okay. I often describe our life as being on a swing or sitting on a swing. So as children, we've all sat on a swing, right? If we are sitting on the swing, then it's a very enjoyable experience, because the swing and I are moving at the same pace, right? In the same sync, we are synchronized. But if I'm standing on the ground and the swing is moving, every time the swing goes by me, it will hit me. See, this is how, unfortunately, we live in the world. We live in the world completely hit by all the things that are happening in the world, because we are never in sync, right? If we are in sync with natural laws, then we have a beautiful experience of life. So as physical beings, we should live in this world according to the natural law. So the first thing I always tell people, the first thing we should do to realize all of these things is to respect the natural law of hunger. Okay, so we should eat only when we are hungry. If we are not hungry, we should not eat. If we respect and follow this one rule or one law, this itself will give us a lot of insight into many other things, including this concept of dvavimau purusho loke ksharas chakshara evacha. The same divine principle has divided itself into the alive world or the living world and the inert world. It's come out of the same thing. Okay, even what we call as the inert material or the inert earth, that inert earth has also come from the same principle. Okay, there are changes in this material world, but then there is an observer. I, the observer, he is steady, is it not? But I, as apart from the other eyes, that's not the truth. Okay, there is only one I, there is only one true I, and that I is beyond both kshara and akshara, is what the Lord is going to tell us now. Uttamaha purushastu anyaha paramatma iti udahrutaha yo lokatrayamavishya vibhartya avyaya ishvara. Vibharti avyaya ishvara. That is how this whole Sanskrit verse is broken down. All right. But distinct is the supreme Purusha, called the highest self. Supreme self Purusha is the Uttama Purusha or Purushottama, the indestructible Lord who, pervading the three worlds, waking, dream and deep sleep, sustains them. So in the 15th verse, we had seen Sarvasya chaham hrudi sannivishto mattah smriti jnanam apohanam cha, right? So I am the one who is supporting the waking experience, the dream experience, and the deep sleep experience, right? So this Purusha is Anya. He is other than both Kshara and Akshara. Uttama Purushastu Anyaha. See, in Sanskrit, the first person, second person, and the third person, the way we understand in English, the first person is I, the second person is you, and the third person is he or she. That's how we understand English language. In Sanskrit, the third person is actually referred to as the Pratham Purush. The second person, you, is referred to as the Madhyam Purush. and I, the first person, is referred to as the Uttama Purush. Okay. So look at this. In the third person, there can be many third persons. So he, she, and they. They will include he and she both, right? The second person is also you, meaning there are many yous. So you and thou. In fact, in English, the classical English, the word for singular you is thou and multiple you is you, right? But I, the first person, the Uttam Purush, is always one. There is no plural for one. When I use the plural for I, it includes the second and the third person. So when I say we, I is only I, right? But when I say we, then it includes the second person and the third person. So therefore, the Uttama Purush or the Purushottam, it includes both Kshara and Akshara, and it is both immanent and transcendent. That's how the Purushottam is. That's actually our true nature. All right. So then he says, Yasmat Ksharam Atitoham Aksharad Apichottamaha. As I transcend the perishable and am even higher than the imperishable, therefore I am declared the Purushottama. Atosmi loke vedeja pratitah Purushottamaha. The highest Purusha in the world as well as in the Vedas. So Yasmat Aksharam Atitoham. Yasmat Ksharam Atitoham means I am beyond the Kshara. And then Aksharad Apicha Uttamaha. Aksharad means I am also better than the Akshara. I am beyond the Kshara and I am beyond the Akshara. All right. So that's why in the Vedas as well as in the material world or in the world in which we live, I am considered as the Purushottama. So that's how Purushottama is understood and described. All right. When he says, Yo mam evam asammudho janati purushottamam sa sarvavid bhajati mam sarvabhavena bharata. So he who undeluded, asammudho means undeluded, thus knows me, the Supreme Purusha, he, all-knowing, worships me with his whole being, O Bharata. So that's what the Lord says, the one who understands me in this manner and worships me, he is the one who completely understands me. All right. Then he says, Iti guhyatamam shastram idam uktam maya nagha etad buddhva buddhiman syat kruta krutyascha bharata. So iti guhyatamam shastram means I have told you the deepest secret or the most secret knowledge. Guhyatamam. So there are 3 degrees, right? Infinitive, comparative or superlative, and the first and the second and the third, like good, better and best, right? Infinitive, comparative and superlative. So therefore, Guhya Shastra is the way we live in this world. Guhya Tara Shastra is the way of worship, upasana. Okay? And Guhya Tama Shastra is understanding who we are. So this is the Guhya Tama Shastra. Guhya Tama means the most secret or the most important secret. Guhya means secret. And Tama means the extreme secret. All right. So this is the Guhya Tama Shastra, knowing yourself. This is what I have told you. Idam Uktam Mayanaga. That is how it is said. Okay. Now I have taught you this. Oh, Mayanaga means sinless one. Anagha means somebody who is sinless. You see, this entire 15th chapter or the knowledge portion of the Gita can be understood by us only when we purify ourselves sufficiently. If we are not purified sufficiently, then we will not even understand this. What about purifying ourselves sufficiently mean? What does that mean? It means that first we have to completely give up any asakti or any attachment to the worldly things. You know, the Lord had told us in the 5th verse, remember? Nirmana moha jita sangha dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kama dvandvair vimukta sukha dukkha saunyair Gachanti Mudha Padama Vyamtat, right? So he had told us what to do. So when we purify ourselves through that practice, that's when we become eligible to understand all this. Then he says, Etad Budhva. He does not say Etad Krutva or Etad Jnatva. Thus, when you understand this, Budhva, when you internalize it. So what does internalization mean? Internalization means once you have consumed something, you have completely digested it. So when we eat the food, if we don't digest it completely, it will go either, the right way or the wrong way, right? But if it is digested, then it will get converted into all the 7 dhatus according to the Ayurveda, right? So that is called internalization. So earlier when I was eating a mango, it was a mango apart from me. But once I ate that mango, it became a part of me, or the material of the mango became a part of me. So I have internalized it. So in the same manner, all of this understanding of the Gita, whatever is written in the Gita, when I understand all of it as a part of me, as me, that is when Kruta Krutyascha Bharata will happen. Kruta Krutyascha means I'm completely fulfilled. Whatever I had to do in this world, I'm done doing it. Okay. So that doesn't mean that you will stop doing your daily routines or whatever. I mean, if I get hungry, I eat. Whatever job I have to do, I do. Whatever things I have to do for the family, I do. Right? I do all of those, but I do them to express joy rather than trying to find joy from that. So, our common habit is like, I want to have 5-star food, then I will be happy. My child should be, he should come first in merit, only then I will be happy. If he doesn't come first in merit, if he comes second in merit just by 1 mark, then I will say, how come, where did you lose this 1 mark? Why did you not come first in merit? So if my happiness is dependent upon something else, either a person or a thing or an object or an event, then I will not be 100% happy, isn't it? Because not everything will happen the same way as I expect. The world does not happen the way I want. That is the root cause of all of our misery, is it not? When I understand that this entire world is the way it is described in the first 2 verses, Urdhva Moolam Adha Shakam, and then it is all illusion, then I don't have any complaints about the world. I don't have any expectations from the world, and I don't try to correct it because I see it as only a reflection. It's not real, right? So once I understand all of this, then I get a feeling of Krutakrutyata or fulfillment or complete satisfaction. Beyond that, I don't really need to do anything further. So to recap what we have learned so far in chapter 15, which is the summary of the Vedic wisdom. See, remember I told you that wisdom or knowledge itself means Vedas. The word Veda means knowledge or wisdom. The summary or the knowledge portion of the Vedas is in the Vedanta or the Upanishads. And the summary of the Upanishads or the essence of the Upanishads is in the Gita. And the essence of the Gita is in chapter 15. See how concentrated this whole wisdom is. So if we focus on this chapter 15, if we understand this chapter 15 completely and internalize it, what do we need to do? See, internalize means this is the understanding of chapter 15. But there has to be practice of knowledge, is it not? So the practice of knowledge is to continue to do the sadhana. Nirmana moha jitasanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivruddha kama dvandvair vimukta. So these are the 5 things we should continuously do all the time. And within our mind and within our heart, within our consciousness, we should always dwell on sarvasya chaham. Okay? And Vedeshta sarvair ahameva vedyo. To know myself is the highest goal in life, right? So in chapter 15, we got an understanding of the Jagat, this world. What we think of the world, is it really like that? It's not, it's an illusion. What we think about ourselves as the individual jiva, it's an illusion. What we think of the Ishvara or the controller or God as we call it, or deity, that is an illusion. I am the real one. I am the only one here. Sarvasya cha aham, right? So That is what we need to understand from chapter 15. I'm everywhere. Everything is within me. Okay. What I see as apart from me is only an illusion. The only reality is me. This is the Guhyatamam Shastram. This is the subtlest of all knowledge. Once I understand this, then I'm completely fulfilled. So, thus we have concluded chapter 15 of the Gita. Gita is a timeless text. It is relevant today as it has always been. It helps us live a peaceful and enjoyable life. It helps us experience the highest quality of life. It helps us realize our essential nature, which leads to fulfillment. So, this is my contact details. By all means, those who wish to speak to me further are welcome to contact me, and I'll be happy to talk to them. Let me see if I can go into this. Is anybody waiting here? I don't know if people are waiting in the waiting room. But in any case, this is what I wanted to say today. It's brief. It's not too long, maybe 20-25 minutes. And I'll be happy to take questions. If anybody has any questions, please raise your hand or unmute yourself, and then we will take those questions. Sudhir, are you still there? I think we've lost Sudhir, but that's okay. I will try to conduct this meeting and also speak at the same time. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand, and then I'll be happy to unmute you, and then we can go ahead with the discussion. So any questions, please? Okay, so Samir, I'm trying to unmute you here. You try to unmute yourself also. You can, great. Go ahead, please, Samir.
Yeah, doctor, can you hear me?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, has Karma Siddhanta been disproved in the current period of human existence, before or long before? Has at any time of human existence has the Karma Siddhanta been disproved?
Okay, good. So let me try to answer this question. Good question. Samir, has the Karma Siddhanta been disproved? Karma Siddhanta is eternal. Karma Siddhanta is immutable. Karma Siddhanta is always in effect. Okay. The only time or the only way you can circumvent the Karma Siddhanta is by going beyond it. In the sense, if or as long as we consider ourselves to be the doer, as long as I consider myself to be a jiva and a doer, until then the fruits of my action will accrue to me. I will be bound by those fruits of action because I have considered myself to be the author of those actions. So the Karma Siddhanta is applicable only as long as I am the doer. But the moment I completely give up any doership, I say that the Lord is in charge. He is the one who is doing it. I am not doing it. So you see what happens is, I'll give you the example of how we eat the food, right? When we eat food, I'm the one who's eating it. All right. So then its effects will happen on me. But I'm not the one who is digesting it. See, I can have the ownership or doership about eating the food, but I don't have any doership regarding the digestion of the food. Right? Digestion is being done by natural law. It is being done by the Lord. He says, Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashritaha Pranapana Samayuktaha Pachamyannam Chaturvidam. So he is the one who is digesting it. So digestion is happening. Digestion I'm not doing. So I don't have any sense of doership in digestion, but I have a sense of doership in eating. So the consequences of digestion, I'm not responsible for those, but I'm responsible for what I eat. See, if I understand the laws of how food gets digested and how it gets assimilated or gets disposed of, if I understand those laws, then I will have control over what to eat, how much to eat. with what attitude I should eat. Okay? So the law of karma is applicable only when I'm the doer. But if I'm not the doer, then the law of karma is not applicable. All right, Nilma, I'm going to unmute you. Let us see if I can unmute you here. Can you unmute yourself also? Okay, you are unmuted now. Go ahead, Nilma, please.
I just wanted to know, is there a rule where it says that you should not complete your reading your Gita? One of my friend was telling that you should not complete it. There should be some chapter unread and you have to keep reading it the whole life.
Okay, I don't know if that is true or not. I have read the entire Gita, not in one go, of course. I have
Okay.
not read the Sanskrit version, frankly, because I'm not really good at Sanskrit. Many people might assume that I know Sanskrit, but I don't know Sanskrit. I try to understand the meaning of each word. I also have read the commentaries by many other masters, much more experienced than I am. And I've tried to experience all of these things within myself. So that is, what should I say, my sadhana. All I've done is sadhana. And due to the sadhana, this meaning has appeared within my heart. All right. All of this meaning I have given you so far, it's all because of my own contemplation, by my own practice, and the way I understand it. Okay. I don't, as I said before, I've said many times, you may understand it differently, which is okay. There is no problem if somebody else understands this differently. If they believe that you should leave one chapter unread, or if you should read only. I heard a story from from our Swamiji once, that one person used to read the Gita, and then he read the Gita and he came up to the verse in the first chapter. He came up to the verse where it says, Krishna was driving this chariot and there were, 4 or 5 white horses. And this description will lead him into Samadhi. He never read the Gita beyond that. Even then he was fulfilled. So depends upon where we are in terms of our own spiritual evolution or consciousness. We can reach the Samadhi state with any verse in the Gita. All 700 are just as pure. I have tried to read all the chapters and I've tried to understand all of them. 15th is the one that's the most fascinating because I'm, I guess, intellectually inclined. I like to study, I like to understand things. I have an analytical mind because I've studied for so many years in school and college and got a PhD. When you do a PhD, you develop a critical or an analytical mind. That's what happens to you. So when we do that, then you try to analyze everything and try to understand all of the things that you read. But all of this understanding is essentially academic. That academic understanding has to translate into pure experience on your own personal experience. Only then it starts making sense. Otherwise it does not. So I've read the Gita many times, commentaries by many people many times, but didn't really make as much sense to me then as it makes to me now because I've tried to experience it myself. So ultimately our experience is the pramana. That's the last thing, pratyaksha pramana. So you should see it yourself. You should experience it yourself. Only then it is the truth. Otherwise, it may be the truth, but as it is seen from a completely different perspective. But when you experience the truth, it means something totally different to you. Totally different to you. I see Dr. Naravane. I'm so delighted you have raised your hand. I'm trying to unmute you here. If you can unmute yourself, great. You are unmuted now. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Great to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you, doctor. While you were just talking with Nilimaji, it struck me that maybe this is an arrangement so that the sadhak comes back again and again and assimilate the knowledge at a deeper level, each time going to deeper and much deeper level. That might be the purpose of saying that you leave something incomplete. You leave some chapters so that you come back again and again. That's it.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I had never thought of it in that manner. And yes, if we leave things incomplete, then you may come back and then enjoy this experience again, enjoy the experience of reading the Gita again.
Yeah.
That's fine. So if that's the intention, I think it's a noble intention. One may do that.
After
Personally,
all,
frankly, after all, what? Go ahead.
it's a continuous journey of learning.
That is true. But then there comes a point in your life when you feel like graduating. So I feel like graduating. I feel like what the Lord has said, Nirmana Moha Jita Sangha Dosha Adhyatma Nitya Vinivritta Kama. I would like to become Nivritta from Kama, all desires.
Yeah.
So if the Lord wishes, that may happen. It's all Hari Ichha. See, we can only align our desire with the divine desire. That's all we can do. When our desire becomes completely aligned with the divine desire, that's when we get a feeling of liberation even while we are in this body. It's called Jivan Mukta.
Sure.
Jivan Mukta is basically the one who is free from desire, not free from the body. You don't have to die.
Yeah.
You just have to drop your own misunderstanding that you are this body. So as long as I have a sense of otherness, I'm bound. As long as I have a sense of this is me and there is something other, until then I'm bound. But once that sense of otherness is dropped, then that bandhan is dropped. In fact, I said in one of the webinars earlier, and I understand it in this manner now, that bandhan is mithya, moksha is also mithya. Who is bound? I have assumed myself to be bound. I'm not bound. So this assumption of I'm being bound or I am bound is also mithya. Is also an assumption. It's not true. You see, we also think when we are a child, or a child doesn't feel like remaining a child. The child feels, I want to grow older. I want to become an adult, right? So now, as we are older, we are not craving for the childhood body, right? So childhood body was there, but it went away. We were not stuck with it. So the things that change, they keep changing. If we realize the changing world to be an illusion, then we are no longer bound by it. And that can happen anytime. So we have to understand who we are only once. See, in the last verse of the second chapter, the Lord says, Esha Brahmi Sthiti Partha. Anta Kalepi, even if you understand this at the very last moment, like, in the Puranas, there is a story of Ajamila. Ajamila papi asi tyala nele vaikunthasi, right? Ajamila, he had named his son Narayana. And just at the end of his life, he said Narayana. And then because he uttered the word Narayana, he went to Vaikuntha, they say. So the last thought we have in our mind before we leave this body, in that thought, we go further. If we have no thought, then we go nowhere. We are liberated. That's how it is. Thank you for this comment. I appreciate that. I see Mr. Vivek Patil. I'm going to unmute you.
Can you hear, sir?
Namaskar, bola.
Namaskar. Sir, just actually what you mentioned about, I perfectly agree with you. Is it actually just, this is just a I want to know your opinion. Like when you read the Ashtavakra Gita, which directly talks about the direct reality, just we thought that if you are bound, then as you think, as you become, ya mati, sa mati. So,
Correct.
what is your correlation between this? If you compare the Bhagavad Gita in total, because you have gone through the complete all the chapters and you're experiencing also and all those things. But as far as Ashtavakra Gita is concerned, we directly talks about the direct realizations and that experience. How you correlate with that and this?
Okay, so Gita is the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna
Yeah,
as it is written, right?
Yeah.
That's how, if we are reading as a reader, if Gita is a book for us,
yeah,
okay, that's how we will read it.
correct.
So there is a sense of otherness between me and the book. So this is a book, this is the Gita. I know it is the Gita, and I know I'm not the Gita or I'm not the book. So there is a sense of otherness, isn't it?
Oh,
But when we read the Gita, when we contemplate on it, and when we understand it, internalize it, when we start understanding that I myself am the Arjuna and I myself am the Krishna. So my nature as bound by this body, or my assumption that I am the body, is the Arjuna consciousness. But my own true nature, which transcends both my body and my mind, and my assumption that I am a jiva, that consciousness itself is Krishna, and that is also within me. So Arjuna is also me, Krishna is also me. When I understand the Gita in this manner, then only then I internalize it. All right. And once I internalize that in this manner, then thereafter I experience the world as an illusion. I enjoy it. It's just like looking at a rainbow. You know, you are in Delhi. So in Delhi, I just got a beautiful picture from a friend from Delhi. Says that there are two rainbows, complete rainbows, almost like a semicircle, half circle,
yeah,
because the rains happened in the afternoon, and then in the evening there was a beautiful rainbow. Now that rainbow we enjoy, is it not? But
Yeah.
we know that the rainbow is only a phenomenon. It's not real. So after seeing the rainbow, I am not tempted to take a piece of it and bring it home for my kids.
Correct.
No, because I know it is only a phenomenon. It's an illusion. So in the same manner, when I understand this entire world to be like that, I have no craving for it. That's what happens after you internalize the Gita, that the cravings for the worldly things will completely vanish. And this cessation of cravings, or this elimination of cravings, is Vinivritta Kama. So that Vinivritta Kama, initially you will do it as a practice, as a sadhana, but ultimately when you experience it, when you know that the world is illusory, then where will that asakti be? That asakti will simply drop. जो वस्तु है ही नहीं, उसके बारे में मेरे मन में आसक्ति क्यों होगी?
हाँ, वो तो बात सही
है ना? So you have to understand it in this manner. See, all of these questions appear in our mind,
Yeah.
Vivek ji, because we have considered this world to be apart from us.
Correct.
See, you can look at the world in both
Duality.
manners. Now, I actually wanted to bring the jnana and the bhakti together, and I'm glad you asked me in this manner. So, from the jnana point of view, I see the world as an illusion.
Correct.
Right? So, therefore, I have no craving for it.
Correct.
But if I'm a bhakta, from the bhakti point of view, you know, Ishavasyamidam Sarvam, everything is Paramatma.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So, for a bhakta, he will look at the world and he will say it is Paramatma. Okay. And a jnani will look at the world and he will say it is Mithya. Isn't it? So, normally what we do, we are actually looking at Paramatma, but we are calling it the world. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Ishavasyamidam Sarvam, isn't it?
Correct.
So, this world is completely pervaded by the same principle.
Yeah.
But we are calling it the world, which is Mithya.
Which
See,
is
the truth is it is all Paramatma. But I'm calling it the world. Isn't it? But the bhakta, the true bhakta, will bow down before anything and everything, because everything is Paramatma.
Correct.
See, that is why in our culture, a small piece of earth, a small rock, we can consider that to be God.
Mhm.
The cow is God, the mother is God,
Yeah.
father is God, the
बरं
guru is God. For me, all of you are God
Yeah.
because I'm learning from all of you.
Correct. Correct.
So that's how
हा
my understanding is.
Okay.
बरं
All right, so I'm going to try to take some other questions. If somebody has any questions, please raise their hand and I'll be happy to. So Kiran, I'm delighted. I'm trying to unmute you. Can you unmute yourself? All right, great. Go ahead, Kiran, please.
Sir, as you said that the law of karma is applicable only when you understand that you are the doer, like I'm the doer.
Yes.
Then why do we blame some superpower when things go wrong and we say that it was destined by God, sort of thing, that it went wrong and it was destined to happen? How
All right.
can we solve this complexity?
All right. I will answer that. Try to answer that question. See, the situation we see in the world right now, that situation is basically a result of our collective karma, I would say. All right. The divine neither hates us nor overly loves us. Okay. The divine principle manifests itself in this world as the law of karma, and in the material world, as long as we live in the material according to the law of karma. So if you experience an unpleasant situation, that unpleasant situation is not because God is angry with me or whatever. No, it's the result of our own collective karma. So for example, we see that the earth, since you are an environmental scientist, you will understand this example. We are on this earth right now, which is slightly warmer, a degree or so warmer than it used to be 200 years ago. Why is it warmer? Because we mined all the reduced carbon from underneath the earth and we burnt it into carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide traps heat. So that's why this entire world became a bit warmer than it used to be. Why did we do that? We did that because our desires have no end, and we have mistakenly assumed that fulfilling the desires is equal to fulfillment in life, which means fulfilling the desire is becoming happy. That is how I have understood, or I have assumed. That assumption is wrong. Fulfillment of life, fulfillment in life is not by fulfillment of desires. Fulfillment in life is going beyond desires. That is what we have learned in the 15th chapter. So therefore, the circumstances in which we find ourselves are not because God is unhappy with us. Circumstances in which we find ourselves are a result of our own past actions. All right. That's how I understand it. I see KESPL as unmuted, and you probably want to say something. So why don't you say something? KESPL.
नाही मी ऐकत होतो
Go ahead. Why don't you say your name first and then talk?
अहो मी सहस्रबुद्धे सदानंद सहस्रबुद्धे
Go ahead, please. Sadanand.
नाही मला सांगायचं नव्हतं काही मी ऐकत होतो तेव्हा एक क्षण माझ्या मनात आली होती एक कमेंट पण नंतर ती विरली
बरं, हरकत नाही. No problem. So I'm going to unmute Anita here, because I think Anita had raised her hand, but I probably lowered her hand myself. So why don't Anita, can you please unmute yourself and say what you want to say? Anita, are you there? Okay. Viraj, did you want to say something? I thought that you wanted to. I saw you here. I'm going to unmute you and see if you want to say something. I'm unable to unmute, so you have to unmute yourself. If anybody wants to say anything, please unmute yourself and say. we have another 5 minutes or so before the end of the hour. So I'll be happy to take a couple more questions. Or otherwise, I'll go through these. There is a group chat. Samir, you want to ask one more question? That's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, can I ask the question?
Please go ahead, Samir.
Yeah, is the karma siddhanta applicable to the person after death, or how is it applicable? Whether if it is to the person who dies,
All right.
is it applicable to the atma or
so
what?
no, it is applicable to the subtle body. See, we heard in the verses, 6, 7, 8, 9. Mamaivansho jivaloke jivabhuta sanatana manashashtani indriyani prakritisthani karshati shariram yadavapnoti yachapyutkamati ishvara rohit vaitani sanyati vayurgandhani vashayat. Just like wind will carry the fragrance of a flower with it, in the same manner, our own vasanas, as long as I am in the jiva consciousness, whatever my desires are, all of those desires I'll carry with me, right? So any unfulfilled desires, I will try to fulfill using the next body. Okay, that's how the law of karma will work. And whatever I have done during this time, which I have not completely worked out, that I will need to work out in a different body. So that's how the law of karma will work. So the law of karma is not limited just to this body. In fact, you tell me, is there an answer for the question why you were born in this family to these parents or in these circumstances? You cannot really answer that question based on your experience in this life. All right. You will have to find the answers in your continuity across lives and across bodies. Only then you can explain that. So to that extent, the law of karma is applicable. You see, all of us have some unworked out karma, some karma we have not worked out yet. That is the reason we are in this body. So we must have some good or bad desires left over from the previous time. That is why we have come into this body, right? Otherwise, we would have had no reason to take this body. But while we have this body, while we are in the human form, Vedaischa sarvair ahameva vedyo. That is what we want to do. So once we do that, then we are fulfilled. Then there is no rebirth. Then there is no death. In fact, death, as you mentioned just now, is a myth. Death is only the disintegration of this body. That is what we call as death, right? It's only disintegration of the body, but who died? The jiva has not died. The jiva is still there. He has gone to another body, or he will search for another body. And the elements in this body, the 5 elements, the earth, the water, the fire, the air, and the sky, they all merged into the totality, isn't it? So these elements have also not died. They have only disintegrated. That's all. They have changed their form. So death, as we understand it, is the biggest myth there is. There is no such thing called death. After studying the Gita, if we utter the word death, means we have not understood anything at all. There is no death. Who is going to die? You cannot, you are never born, so you will never die, right? And the body has always been changing, and it is not real. So what is not real, if you give it a position of reality, only then there is a problem. So what will, see, if you go away from in front of the mirror, what will happen to the reflection? Nothing. The reflection wasn't there in the first place. But as long as you consider that reflection to be real, that's when you have a problem. So this world, this body, the entire material experience is basically an imagination of our own mind. So once we understand that all of this is an illusion and the only reality is you, Tattvamasi, that's when you will become completely fulfilled. So I'm going to unmute Vyoma Deshpande here. She has raised her hand. So Vyoma, can you please go ahead and say?
Yes, sir. My question is, whenever we study a subject, there are 2 ways. science requires us that we should experiment it, and depending on the experience we should believe on that inference. But study of spiritual sciences require us to believe on certain assumptions and presumptions. So there are two ways. So we have to believe on something, and we have to first experience something and then trust on it. So as a seeker, how we should look, or how we should combine these two streams to understand Gita in its proper sense?
Wonderful. That's a great question. Thank you for asking this question. You see, even in science, there is initially a belief. All right. So the scientist will look at all the references, all the work that has been done in the past, and he will assume that whatever he has read is true. And then he will go further. And then what will happen in his own experiments, whatever he has studied and whatever he has assumed to be true will be proven once again. All right. So when you go to the school and you read a science textbook, you read whatever is written in textbook, the teacher will tell you that this is what the book says, and you will also memorize it and you will pass the exam. But you don't really experience it. All right. So whatever knowledge we gain from the books, whether it is science or whether it is spirituality or whatever, initially we do take it on faith. But through sadhana, we will verify that, and it will come true within our own experience. So if you try to learn a subject with skepticism, then you may not reach the same conclusion. But if you study a subject with some faith in the beginning, then that faith will be confirmed in your own experience. That's how we should look at the Gita. You know, in one of my previous webinars, I said, I had told you, who should I listen to? I should listen to the person who has experienced the truth, who wants nothing from me, and who has my benefit in his heart. Only then I should listen to that person. So the scriptures or the Gita or the Upanishads are like that. Nobody wrote the Upanishad because they wanted to get a PhD or they want to make money out of my belief in that Upanishad. No. The Upanishad was written down because of the internal inspiration of the Rishi. All right. So all of these mantras of the Vedas and the Upanishads and everything, they are all the internal expression of the truth or the manifestation of the truth as they have found out internally, all the Rishis. That's what the Vedas are. They don't want anything from me. That is the truth because they had experienced it. They don't want anything from me. And they are expressed or they are said because for the benefit of the entire humanity, me, you, and everybody. So that is why we have to have Shraddha in our own scriptures, in the Shruti. Vedas are the Shruti. Shruti means what I've heard. What I've heard when there was no noise. So in deep silence, in total silence, whatever I've heard from the universe, that is the Shruti, that is the Veda. I will not understand the Veda unless I'm quiet myself. So until I have all kinds of noise going on in my mind that I'm this body, this world is real, there is a God up there somewhere who's controlling everything. Until all of these misconceptions are there in my mind, I will not understand the truth at all. So initially the Lord said, Urdhvamula Madashakam, the world is not real, Nirmana Moha, Chitta Sangha Dosha, get rid of it through your practice. Then, the Jiva, how it is not real, Vimudha Nanu Pashanti, Pashanti Jnana Chakshusha. And then about the Ishvara, then he says, Baba, you know yourself. Vedaischa Sarvair Ahameva Vedyo. All right. So that is the truth. So initially you approach it with Shraddha, with faith, and then you verify that within your own experience. That's how you should approach the Gita. Only then you will understand it. Great question though. Thank you so much. I'm going to unmute Anita here. Just one second, Anita. Okay, Sadanand, go ahead.
मी काही बोललो चालेल का ह्याच्यावर?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
व्योमा देशपांडेंच्या प्रश्नालाच मला जरा थोडं उत्तर द्यायचं होतं.
Okay. Can you do that in English or Hindi? Because there are many people on
Yes,
this
I'll do
call
that.
who may not understand Marathi.
Yes. Only thing is, you will have to actually kind of help me with that exact verse. Essentially, in the 4th adhyaya of Bhagavad Gita, the 40th verse, 40th verse. In that 40th verse, the Lord says, I'm actually telling it in Marathi. You will need to tell the Sanskrit verse. Nase jnana nase shraddha samshayi nasala pura. Naha loka nato loka napave sukha samshayi. What it basically means is the world of science that we talk of today has actually converted us rather than a seeker into more of a disbeliever. And so essentially we start with negating or with negative thinking about it, where we don't have either the understanding of it or we don't have a faith in it, and then we keep on questioning the things, and that is where basically then we end up falling between two stools, because of we don't have either of the knowledge or wisdom or the faith. So, as you rightly said, yes, one would need to start with the faith and then progressively experience it to reach probably the gain the knowledge. I'm done.
Correct, correct. So I will translate that. It says, let me see if I can play this. I'm going to try to play this. No, somehow I'm not able to do that. So anyway, I will read the English translation. It says, but persons who possess neither faith nor knowledge and who are of a doubting nature suffer a downfall. So Sadanand, if you can mute yourself, will be great. For the skeptical, there is no happiness either in this world or the next. So if we approach this with skepticism, see, the world of science is basically the study of something which is other than me. Okay, science is the study of what Gita will call as anatma. Anatma means whatever I'm considering as other than me. All right, so the study of anatma can be done in this manner, the way you have asked. And maybe the way of science is like that. You have a hypothesis and you either prove it or disprove it based on certain experiments, and those experiments can be undertaken by anybody. That is how science works, right? But in terms of the subjective science is based on experience, our own experience. So that experience cannot be obtained, or we will not have that experience unless we have undertaken enough sadhana. Okay, so we have to purify ourselves sufficiently before we can experience it. So even in science, the instrument of knowledge has to be sharp enough and precise enough. Only then it will give you the right answer. And it has to be an appropriate instrument. So for example, if you want to weigh an elephant, you will have to use in India what we call dharam kata, means where the trucks are weighed, right? On the roadside, there are scales for weighing a truck. On that, you will have to place the elephant to be able to weigh him. But the weight of a small amount of powder in the chemical laboratory will have to be done on the chemical balance. Both instruments are giving you the same answer. Material X weighs Y. Okay, but the kind of instrument you have to use is totally different. So to understand these things, understand the Gita, your mind, your intellect have to be sufficiently purified to be able to understand the subtleties of the knowledge. If you don't have that, or if I don't have that, then I will not understand this at all. As long as my mind is busy pursuing the things of the world, as long as my mind is full of desires, I will not understand the 15th chapter at all. Okay, so we have to purify ourselves sufficiently before we can understand this. Until then, Gita will be a nice storybook. It will be good for entertainment. It will sound good also. There are many people who have sung the Gita. There are YouTube videos in which people have sung beautifully. Lata Mangeshkar has sung, I think, the entire Gita based on various ragas. It's really beautiful. You will be entertained by it. You will enjoy the music of it, but you will not understand the meaning of the Gita. So to understand the meaning of the Gita, we have to purify ourselves and we have to sharpen our instruments of perception. So for that, incidentally, I have to come back to the same thing. To improve your perception, you have to purify your mind. To purify your mind, I think you have to have control over your senses, and the most important sense is your tongue. So if you control what you eat, how much you eat, when you eat, that will help you. So that is the crux of all the sadhana. Eat only when you're hungry. All right, I'm going to unmute Anita here. Vivekji, please wait for a few minutes because you and I talked earlier. So there are other people who want to ask questions. So I'm going to unmute Anita here.
Yes, sir.
Sorry,
Sir,
go ahead,
can
Anita,
you-
please go ahead. Yeah, now you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question with regard to idol worship. So I just
Yes.
wanted to know how should our devotion slowly drop from form to formlessness? I know it's achieved through meditation, but how is it exactly done? Because we are all brought up with a thought that the idol worships, it begins with an idol worship.
Yeah, because see, the divine principle is very hard to comprehend initially, right? So look at it from the point of view, as a child, I'm sure you would have played with miniature vessels and instruments and devices in the kitchen, and then you made a whole kitchen that looked like a miniature kitchen and you played with it, right? And you enjoyed that. While you were doing that, it was almost like the real kitchen for you. So your parents would say, baby, give me a cup of tea, and you would make a cup of, you'll make, just the action of making the tea, and then you will give that little cup to your parents, and then the parents would do like this, and they say, baby, kitna acha tea banaya, what a wonderful tea. So while you are in that stage, that entire game is necessary. Okay. So idol worship is not bad. Idol worship is necessary because that idol focuses our attention. See, upasana is necessary for making the mind focused and single pointed. There is a whole story of, have you heard of the Tripura Rahasya? Let me tell you the story of Parashurama. This Parashurama was a Brahmin. And in his time, the Kshatriyas had become very arrogant, and he thought that this entire world is troubled by Kshatriyas. So I'm going to get rid of these Kshatriyas. I will make this entire earth Nikshatriya. I will erase the Kshatriyas from the face of the world. So then he takes a Parashu, an axe himself, and then he wants to completely eliminate the Kshatriyas, which he does 21 times. Okay. Now, the definition of the word Kshatriya means somebody who is holding a Shastra, who is holding a weapon. So, as soon as Parashurama picks up an axe, a weapon, Parashurama is no longer a Brahmin. He is himself a Kshatriya. If that's the case, if he understands this properly, then what should he do? He should cut his own neck first, right? Then there will be no Kshatriya in the world. Because there will be no world because he won't be there, right? So 21 times he does this experiment. 22nd time he runs into Lord Rama, the next avatar. So 2 avatars happened in the same yuga. So initially Parashurama and then Rama. So this Rama, of course, defeats Parashurama because Rama is, the more evolved version. Vishnu 7.0. So Vishnu 7.0 will erase Vishnu 6.0, right? The new version of Windows will erase the old version of Windows, isn't it, on your computer? So therefore, this Parashurama is defeated by Rama, then he gets frustrated. Then he goes to Himalayas. Then in the Himalayas, he runs into a Babaji, some sannyasi who is sitting and he's just enjoying. So as soon as Parashurama approaches him, he goes near him, he feels a great sense of peace and tranquility. So he is wondering, he asks this Babaji, what is this? He says, no, this is Brahmananda. What is this Brahmananda? Explain to me. I want to experience it myself. You please tell me how I can do this. So Parashurama says, so the Babaji says, Parshuram, it seems like you are a very intelligent person. I'm not very educated. I'm from the village. I'm an ordinary villager. So you need a more intelligent guru than me. So you go learn from Dattatreya. So Dattatreya, Lord Dattatreya is the guru. We call him Datta Guru. So the Babaji sends him to Datta Guru. Dattatreya tells him they are standing near a small river. In the Himalayas, the rivers are beautiful, and next to the river, there is a small piece of rock. Nice rock. So the Dattatreya, the teacher, gives this rock to Parashurama. He says, this is no ordinary rock. This is Tripura Devi. You have to worship this Tripura Devi and feed her nice food, put nice clothes around her, put her in a nice soft bed. But you should do upavasa. You should sleep on the ground and you should pray to her and you should do this upasana. So Parashurama asks Dattatreya, okay, I'll do that, but how long? How many days? He said, do it for 12 years. 12 years. He said, okay, do it. He said, okay, I'll do it for 12 years. So 12 years, he does it. But then in 12 years, after all this, nothing really happens to that rock. And he starts wondering, is this really Tripura Devi? Who is this Tripura Devi? I had to ask Dattatreya because nothing has happened. Huh? So he goes to Dattatreya and he says, Dattatreya, I have been doing this for the last 12 years. I have wasted my time 12 years. Who is this Tripura Devi? So Dattatreya says that your 12 years were not wasted. Your upasana was not wasted. At the end of the upasana, when this question is raised in your mind, who is this deity I am worshipping? To answer that question, Dattatreya told him what is called the Tripura Rahasya. That entire grantha called Tripura Rahasya, then he talks about, what is the true self and all those things. So all of these things are there in our scriptures. So these are all nice stories. See, ultimately the moral of the story is Vedaishcha sarvair ahameva vedyo. Just remember that one thing. Vedaishcha sarvair ahameva vedyo. The purpose of all the Vedas are loudly and emphatically declaring that this is the purpose of human life. Okay. So once we understand it in this manner, then even the worship of the idol is understood in this manner. It's to create that jigyasa or the inquisitiveness within our own mind as to who this deity is. Who is Krishna? When that question arises in our mind, that's when we start going to chapter 13, 14, 15. Okay. Until we are enjoying the worship of that idol, then we are in chapter 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 in the Gita. That is our own evolution. This whole Gita is our own story. It's not apart from me. All right. So now I'm going to unmute Vivek ji once again. Vivek Patil. Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes. Sorry, I was trying to unmute you and you were trying to unmute yourself. So we were working at cross purposes. Go ahead, please.
See, the question is slightly this thing. Just like some time back, you mentioned about the transmigration of the body after the death. Like depending upon his wish, it will get transformed. But there are different school of thought in that they say that the body get transmigrated only in the human body. But there are other school of thought. They mention that it can go depending upon these any species. Like there are 84 lakhs or whatever the different yonis are there. So it has to transmigrate all this through this. So what is your view on this particular?
Well, it is up to you.
Yes.
So I jokingly say this sometimes. If I am in a human body
Yeah.
and I have the desire to eat like a pig,
Yeah.
then what will the Lord say? The Lord will say that it is my mistake. I gave you a human body. You wanted to eat like a pig. So next time I will correct my mistake. I will give you the pig's body. Then you eat like a pig. So when you are in the human body eating like a pig, you will be ashamed of at least, because you have a human body but you are behaving like a pig. So next time that shame will go away, because I have this desire to eat like a pig. So next time I will put on the appropriate body for that. That's how the transmigration happens. As long as I am considering myself to be the doer. All of these stories are valid. All of these stories are true only as long as I consider myself to be the doer, to be apart from the other. मैंने जब तक अपने आप को परिच्छिन्न मान लिया है तब तक ये सब होता है. As soon as I drop my sense of otherness, all of these stories will become null and void. So this assumption that I am apart from the other has to be dropped. That assumption is the only thing from which I need mukti. Okay. I don't need mukti for myself. I need mukti from myself. Whatever I have assumed myself to be, that notion has to be dropped. That is Krutakrutyata. That is fulfillment. Etad buddha buddhiman sya. You have to only understand this, that you are not apart from the other. You are the whole. You are neither kshara nor akshara. You are uttama purusha. Uttama purushastu anya. Paramatme iti udarada. All right, great. Wonderful. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm delighted all of you came and spent an hour and 20 minutes with me. I'm going to close this now, but we shall announce if we are meeting again. I will talk to Sudhir. Unfortunately, he had to drop out because of, I think power shortage there or something. There was heavy rain in Hyderabad. So that's why, unfortunately, he's not there. But anyway, it has been a pleasure. Thank you very much. And we shall meet again. God willing, हरी इच्छा से हम लोग मिलेंगे फिर से एक बार. नमस्कार.